She was 18 when the town decided she was finished. After the last creditor took the parlor table, after the two-room house was emptied and sold for less than the taxes against it, Mira Vale stood on the courthouse steps with a canvas bundle, a brass measuring rule, and $3 in hard coin. By dusk, she had spent every cent of it. Not on food, not on a room, not on passage to a bigger town. She bought the burned-out hill cabin nobody would touch. The clerk laughed when he slid the deed across the counter. The roof was split open. The porch had fallen into weeds. And people in Sawyer's Bend called the place Widow's Ash, because every family who had tried to live there had left with grief behind them. But under the cold stone lip of that ruined hearth, sealed where no one had thought to look, Mira would find a box meant for a stranger. It would not simply save her life. It would prove that some houses are not abandoned because they are worthless. Some are waiting for the one person desperate enough to see their good bones. Mira Vale was born in 1871 in Sawyer's Bend, a narrow mill town tucked between a river, a rail spur, and a wall of dark Pennsylvania timber. The place smelled of wet bark, coal smoke, and rye bread cooling in kitchen windows. Men worked the saws until their shirts stiffened with dust. Women kept gardens in soil that seemed to grow more stone than food. Her father, Caleb Vale, was a bridge carpenter. He could look at a load of lumber and tell which beam would bow before winter. Her mother, Elion, stitched shirts for mill hands and saved seeds in small paper twists labeled in a careful blue hand. They were not rich, but their house had a steadiness Mira would remember for the rest of her life. A warm stove, a shelf of mended cups, her father's pencil marks on door frames showing how much taller she had grown. Her mother's blue glass thimble flashing in lamplight as she worked late beside the window. When Mira was 7, the river took her father. A spring flood tore loose the temporary bridge he was repairing. The men found 2 broken planks 3 miles downriver, but not Caleb. Her mother folded his work coat and placed his brass measuring rule inside it, as if a man might return for a tool if it was kept ready. He did not return. Elion lasted 6 more years. Work and grief thinned her until every cough sounded too large for her body. She died in January, with frost silvering the inside of the bedroom glass, and Mira holding the blue thimble in her fist so tightly it left a circle in her palm. There was no money, only debts, and a girl with no brothers to speak for her. So Mira went to live with her mother's cousin, Dorothea Pike, and Dorothea's husband, Amos. They owned a feed store near the depot, and to hear Amos tell it, taking in Mira was an act of Christian mercy large enough to excuse every cold meal and every locked cupboard that came after it. Dorothea was not cruel in any loud way. She was worse. She was exact. She counted flour. She counted candles. She counted the minutes Mira spent washing, mending, carrying, sweeping. In that house, kindness was a thing to be entered in a ledger and balanced against labor. Mira learned early not to ask for more. The only warm place left to her was a narrow workshop behind the wheelwright shed, where an old builder named Orphan repaired wagon wheels, window sashes, chair legs, and anything else the town was too poor to replace. Orphan had a scar through one eyebrow, a beard full of sawdust, and a habit of speaking only after a silence had done half the work. He found Mira one afternoon, watching him plane a warped board. Instead of sending her away, he handed her a scrap of cherry wood and a dull spoke shave. "Wood tells the truth if you stop arguing with it," he said. That was the first lesson. He taught her how to read grain, how to set a hinge without making a door hang ashamed, how to wedge a loose chair joint, how to sharpen a blade until it could lift a curl of wood thin as onion skin. He taught her that a house failed slowly before it fell suddenly. Water found the roof first. Wind found the cracks. Pride hid both until the floor gave way. For 5 years, Orphan gave her no soft praise. He gave her harder things, scraps to practice on, broken tools to mend, and the old brass measuring rule her father had once traded him for a day's help setting bridge timbers. "When you measure," Orphan told her, placing it in her hand, "measure twice against fear. Fear always cuts short." Mira carried that rule the way another girl might carry a ribbon. At 18, even that small shelter ended. Amos Pike had borrowed against the feed store to buy into a failed timber contract. By spring, men in town had begun speaking quietly when he passed. Dorothea grew sharper with every bill that arrived. Mira felt the decision forming before anyone spoke it aloud. On the morning after her 18th birthday, she found her canvas bundle tied with twine beside the kitchen stove. Her mother's blue thimble was inside, so was her father's rule. On the table lay $3, counted out in silver quarters and worn dimes. Dorothea's note was folded once. "You are grown. We cannot carry another burden. Make a proper life if you are able." Mira read it, set it down, and waited for anger. None came. There are moments when hurt goes past tears and becomes weather. It enters the room, changes the air, and leaves you standing inside it. She took the bundle, she took the coins. She stepped into a morning cold enough to make her breath white, and she did not turn back toward the feed store. She walked first to the courthouse. The county clerk, Hiram Dodd, looked annoyed to see her. He had ink on his cuff and tobacco in his lower lip. When Mira asked about properties the county wanted gone, he gave the thin smile men use when they think poverty has become entertainment. "There are creek lots that flood twice a year," he said. "A collapsed smokehouse near the quarry, and widow's ash above Laurel Notch. But that one is not fit for a goat." Mira asked the price. He pulled a ledger from under the desk and turned to a page stained with old damp. The tax debt had sat unpaid for 16 years. The name on the line was Ezra Bell, stonecutter. "Bell built it for a wife who died there," Dodd said. "Some say he went half mad after. Folks found him frozen in the chair the year after the war. Since then, every roof patch has failed, and every tenant has run back down before winter." "How much?" Mira asked again. He named a figure made for men, with wagons and bank accounts. Mira opened her hand on the desk. $3 lay in the center of his blotter. Dodd stared at the coins, then at her worn coat, then at the ledger. He was not moved by mercy, he was moved by nuisance. A bad entry leaving the county books was better than a bad entry waiting another year. He wrote paid in full. When he pushed the deed over, his mouth twisted. "The luck of it is yours now." Mira folded the paper and placed it inside her coat. By noon, she was climbing the old quarry road toward Laurel Notch. The valley fell behind her with every step. Mill smoke faded. The river became a strip of tin between leafless trees. The road narrowed until brush grabbed at her skirt and loose shale rolled under her boots. She stopped twice to drink from a spring that tasted of iron, and loose shale rolled under her boots. She stopped twice to drink from a spring that tasted of iron. Her bundle cut into her shoulder. Hunger pressed under her ribs, familiar and patient. In her pocket, the brass rule knocked softly against her mother's thimble, the two small sounds keeping time with her climb. Late in the afternoon, she saw the cabin. Widow's ash stood below a ledge of black rock, half sunk in bracken and winter fern. It was smaller than she had imagined, maybe 15 feet by 19. A sagging roof of cedar shakes, 2 empty window frames, a porch collapsed at one corner. Char marked one outer wall from an old chimney fire, giving the logs a scorched, sorrowful face. But Mira did not see only ruin. She saw the set of the foundation stones, huge, level. Not one had rolled. She saw the corner notches, cut clean and tight. She saw the slope of the land carrying rain away from the sill logs instead of under them. And above all, she saw the hearth. It filled the north wall, broad, low, built of dark fieldstone fitted with such patience that the joints looked drawn rather than stacked. Whoever Ezra Bell had been, he had known stone the way Orphan knew wood. Mira stood in the doorless opening as dusk thickened behind her. For the first time in her life, she owned something no one could send her from. It was broken. It was cold. It was hers. The first week was not romantic. It was survival. She slept under the table because the roof leaked least there. She stuffed old sacking into the window holes. She ate parched corn, burdock root, and 2 bruised apples she found in the cellar trench. At night, the wind moved through the cabin as if the mountain itself had lungs. By day, she worked. She cut poles from deadfall and braced the porch before it could pull the front wall loose. She scraped rot from the sill with Orphan's knife. She carried clay from the spring bank and mixed it with chopped grass to seal the gaps between the logs. Her hands split. Her skirt tore. Twice she cried from exhaustion, not sadness, and both times she got up before the tears had dried. A person can be lonely in many ways. Mira had known the loneliness of being unwanted in a crowded kitchen. This was different. On the ridge, nothing pretended to care. The wind did not insult her. The mountain did not count what she ate. The house did not love her. But it answered work with shelter, inch by inch. On the 17th day, rain came hard. Water ran in bright threads down the walls. A fire smoked in the hearth because the chimney still held a nest of sticks and soot. Mira crouched close to the weak heat, wet to the knees, rubbing feeling back into her fingers. Then the firelight caught a line near the hearth base. One stone did not sit quite flush. It was not obvious. A lazy eye would never have found it. But Mira had spent years learning how honest work looked. The hearth was too well made for that uneven lip. She waited until the embers died. Then she set the brass rule along the joint. The gap was less than a finger's width. With a flat iron hinge she had salvaged from the porch, she worried the stone loose. It did not move. She wedged, rocked, stopped, breathed, and tried again. At last, the stone gave a low scrape and shifted forward. Behind it was not earth. Behind it was a narrow cavity lined with tarred cloth. Inside lay a small iron box. For a long moment, Mira did not touch it. The cabin seemed to hold its breath around her. Rain drummed the roof. Water hissed where it fell near the coals. The box was cold and black with age. Its latch had rusted, but it opened with one hard pull. Inside were $72 in gold coins, a packet of treasury notes tied with thread, a deed copy brittle at the folds, and a letter wrapped around a small white stone worn smooth as an egg. Mira unfolded the paper with hands that would not steady. The date at the top read November 3rd, 1868. To whoever has the need and the courage to open this house again, my name is Ezra Bell. I cut the stone in this hearth. I cut it for my wife Ruth, who wanted one wall of the house to be stronger than weather. We had meant to keep goats by spring. We had meant to buy glass for both windows. We had meant to set a cradle where the ash bucket now stands. Ruth died before the first snow. The child did not breathe long enough to be named. I have stayed as long as a man can stay after his reason has gone ahead of him. There is money here because I could not spend it without hearing her ask what we were building. So I leave it for the hand that finds this after mine has failed. Do not waste it on escape, unless escape is the only honest choice. If this house can be made warm again, make it warm. If life gives you nothing but stone, learn where it fits. The white stone was Ruth's. She carried it from the creek on the day we marked the foundation. She said every home needed one thing with no use except remembering. If you build here, build kindly. That will be thanks enough. Mira read the letter once, then again. The money should have been the miracle. It was enough to buy food, tools, glass, nails, a cow if she bargained well. It was more money than she had ever held. But she kept looking at the white stone. One thing with no use except remembering. Until that moment, widow's ash had been a bargain, a refuge, a last defense against being turned into someone else's burden. Now it was no longer only hers. It belonged also to a woman who had wanted window glass, a man who had cut grief into a wall, and a child who had almost had a cradle. Mira pressed the stone into her palm. For the first time since her mother died, she felt not rescued, but trusted. That trust changed how she used the money. At dawn, she wrapped 2 gold coins in cloth, hid the box beneath a loose floorboard, and walked down to Sawyer's Bend. She bought flour, salt, beans, lamp oil, nails, stove black, a wool blanket, and 6 panes of wavy glass. She paid the blacksmith, Jonah Reeve, to forge a hinge set and repair an axe head. She bought a handsaw with 3 missing teeth because she could afford a flawed tool and knew how to make it work. People noticed. A girl who had left town with a bundle had returned with gold. The clerk watched from his window. Dorothea Pike turned away when Mira passed the feed store. Amos stared openly, as if a ledger entry had stepped back onto the page. Mira gave none of them the story. Ezra Bell had trusted a stranger. He had not trusted a town. She hauled the supplies up in 2 trips, each step a negotiation with mud and muscle. Then she rebuilt in earnest. She reglazed the front window, setting each pane with putty made from chalk and linseed oil. She replaced the worst roof shakes with split cedar. She cleared the chimney until soot fell around her shoulders and her cough tasted black. She reset the loose hearthstone, but not before wrapping Ezra's letter in fresh oilcloth and returning it to the cavity with half the money, the white stone, and a note of her own. Not taking, continuing. Those were the only words she wrote. By April, smoke drew clean from the chimney. By May, the porch stood level. By June, beans climbed poles beside the door. The town began to revise its opinion in small, reluctant steps. Jonah Reeve rode up with the repaired axe himself, claiming he wanted to see whether the hill road was passable. He found Mira shaving a replacement door peg with her father's rule laid across her lap. He walked around the cabin once, touched the chinking, tested the porch rail, and nodded. Not many men would have set that square. Mira looked at him. I am not many men. Jonah laughed once, not at her, but with surprise. Before he left, he showed her how to temper a bent nail in the coals and straighten it without snapping the shank. A week later, Mrs. Tansy Rill, a widow from the lower road, climbed up with a covered pot of beans and a packet of onion starts. She did not fuss. She did not ask questions. She stood in the doorway, looked at the clean window and the patched roof, and said, "A house with a garden lasts longer than one with only a lock." Mira took the onion starts. By late summer, a school teacher named Ada Morrow brought 3 broken desks from the Valley School and asked whether Mira could mend them for a fair price. Mira repaired the split legs with oak pins, sanded the ink cuts smooth, and sent them back stronger than they had been new. Ada paid in coins and books with damaged covers. That winter, Mira carved by the hearth, not because she needed to pass time, but because her hands needed beauty after all that mending. She carved foxes curled in sleep, trout twisting against invisible current, little houses with roofs no larger than a thumb. She carved a cradle no child had used and placed it on the mantel for Ezra and Ruth. When spring returned, Ada carried 3 of the carvings to town. They sold before supper. Orders came slowly, then steadily. A carved sign for the apothecary, a cradle board for a miner's baby, a new rocker back for Mrs. Rill, window sash for the schoolhouse, 2 strong boxes for Jonah Reeve, who paid with a better saw than Mira would have dared buy. Nobody called Widow's Ash cursed after that. They called it Mira's place. The name did not arrive all at once. It gathered the way moss gathers on stone, quietly and by staying. A child would point up from the valley at the single lamp in the ridge window. A teamster would say the road was clear as far as Mira's place. Mrs. Rill would send a traveler up for a repaired handle or a bowl of stew. In time, the cabin became less a warning than a marker. Not because sorrow had never lived there, because sorrow had not been allowed the final deed. Mira did not become grand. She did not buy a townhouse or put lace curtains in the window to prove she had risen. She bought a milk goat, then 2. She planted apple seedlings along the spring path. She took in repair work when it came and refused work that insulted the craft. She kept accounts in a school ledger, not because she worshipped numbers the way Amos Pike had, but because she knew survival deserved witnesses. By her 21st year, the $3 cabin had earned back its purchase price more than 100 times over in repairs, carvings, barter, milk, and winter shelter. But that was not the true accounting. The truer one was this. No one could send her away from the table she had built. No one could count her hunger as generosity. No one could look at her hands and say they were empty. One evening in early November, 3 years to the day after Ezra Bell wrote his letter, Mira sat before the hearth while wind combed the ridge grass outside. The room was warm. Beans simmered in a black pot. The repaired window held the night back in 6 wavering squares. On the mantel rested her mother's blue thimble, her father's brass rule, Orrin Kell's old spokeshave, and Ruth Bell's white stone. 4 small things. A woman could lose a family and still inherit their steadiness. She could be cast out with a bundle and still find hands reaching toward her from years before she was born. She could spend her last coins on a ruin and discover that the ruin had been keeping faith better than the living. Mira looked around the room. The straight door, the sound roof, the shelf of carved animals, the clean hearthstone hiding its letter. She understood then that a home is not proven by walls. Walls can rot. Roofs can split. Deeds can be written by men who think they are selling failure. A home is proven by what survives the weather because someone keeps choosing to repair it. Mira Vale had arrived at Laurel Notch with $3, 2 keepsakes, and nowhere else to go. What she found under the hearth did not make her rich. It made her answerable. And with every nail she straightened, every joint she fitted, every cold night she kept the fire alive, she answered. The house had good bones. So did she.